Hey there guys! Let's look at the first of the achievement standards we'll be completing this year. That is AS91354, or the brief. The main point of this standard is to go over what we're going to be creating as our digital media outcome, who it's for, what needs to be included, and how we're going to go about actually making it. As we know, for our Year 12 project this year, we're going to be making a game for a stakeholder. We'll discuss stakeholders in a minute. We should have had some time leading up to this to learn the basics of Unity. How to add assets, how to write some scripts, how to do trigger areas, UIs. But don't worry, there will be more time throughout the year where we upskill ourselves as a class before actually starting development. Now let's look at this document. As we see, it's broken up into a few different sections. Those are planning, research, proposal, improvements, and final. So we'll start at the top, at the planning stage. To begin, before we can start doing anything towards making the game, we need to be able to answer this stage, in particular the first 3 questions. So, we need to source a stakeholder to actually make this game for. A stakeholder could be a family member, a close family or school friend. It could be a teacher within the school, and I've spoken to quite a few, and I've got some names if you want to inquire with me who they are. The main thing is that the stakeholder needs to be somebody who you're going to be making this product for, that can give you timely and good feedback throughout the course of the design and proposal stages. So, you and your stakeholder will need to derive a purpose. Why should you make them a game? Do they want to inform people about something they're quite knowledgeable about? Do they want a way to display the art in an interactive gallery? Do they want an interactive platform for students to learn about something in their subject? It could be somebody has a story idea that they want turned into a game, or just as a form of entertainment for some mates. Whatever it is most important that you and your stakeholder both firstly agree on this purpose, and it's something that you genuinely want to do. Don't feel afraid to shop around for your stakeholder. Remember, you're committing most of your year to this project, so you're going to want to have it as something that you also want to do. So once you've found your stakeholder and decided on a purpose, we can start to fill out these first 2 questions. Your purpose should be written to explain the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? For example, my stakeholder is looking for an alternative way to teach science to Year 8 students in an engaging, interactive way. Notice how this doesn't really explain how I'm going to be solving that problem. It's just more or less saying what the problem my stakeholder has. The next part involves explaining who your stakeholder is. This is the ideal point to add some background information about who they are and their involvement in this project. My stakeholder is named Dr. Spence. They are a science teacher at Mystery Academy, specializing in earth science. They have been teaching for 15 years and love to use exciting new technology to teach the intermediate level students. This gives a larger amount of insight as to who your stakeholder is, with some background information about their passion and ambition for this project. This might include something like interviewing them up front, but that's perfectly fine. So after this, you can start to write the next part of the planning section, end users. So end users are your stakeholders' clients, or the people who are actually going to be using your game. So we have to categorize them. Is your stakeholder targeting a certain gender, age group, ethnic or cultural background? Is there a shared hobby or interest you would expect these end users to have, such as they would all like to play a certain type of sport, or They're all like Pokemon styled games. This is very specific to what your stakeholder has requested. So this is where you need to start putting people into boxes. For example, the end user of this project would be Year 8 students of both genders, passionate about learning earth science. This leads into the user requirements for these specific people of this specific game. What will I, as the developer, need to include? My game will need to be easy to navigate and portray the information about earth science to a Year 8 standard. It should use normal and easy to use controls, use a high quality assets where possible, and it should include a start and pause menu for navigation and how to play and exit the game, along with a bit of a tutorial. This whole section is now complete. This is laying out the base planning of our entire document. Now we're down to the research. It is likely this is going to be the largest section. It's going to include a lot of screenshots. That is one of the main things that's going to fill it up. The first part is a stakeholder interview. This is up front so you can focus your research better when it actually comes to completing that part. Stakeholder interview should include questions for your stakeholder and also mention the answers that they give in here as well. Questions can include what kind of game do you want to make? Do you have a storyline in mind? Is there any reference games I could play or watch gameplay of to get inspiration for this project? What objective is your game going to have? How do you win your game? How do you lose your game? How many levels do you think this game needs? Etc, etc. From the answers, we can pull out things that your stakeholder has identified as requirements. Things that they said your game absolutely must have. This could be, it must be set in a school. Or it must have the ability to cycle through different types of music options. Whatever it may be, mention that in the stakeholder requirements section. When looking at existing media, you should look at similar games. They don't have to be the same in every single way. For instance, you might find a game menu of a completely different genre that you think looks really nice. Make sure to take a screenshot of that and also mention what you like about it. For every screenshot, you should explain what it is I meant to be seeing that you like about this thing. This could include features or functions of the game, aesthetic choices or fonts, maybe colors. This is all a part of starting to form an idea of what is out there and what you and your stakeholder will be making. This next part is called themes. Themes is where you can play around with different ideas that you have. For example, your theme could be volcanoes. Ideas and how this is a reason and reasons to choose this could be this is related to earth science, and we could have a different look at the layers of volcanoes. This will lead you to choosing a single theme or idea, which you can write down there. What kind of puzzles or features is your game going to have? And it's going to include a lot of screenshots of different games that have features or things that you like, including what you're actually going to be able to do in this game. For instance, you could solve riddles, shoot bad guys, fly a plane to an objective. All you need to do is answer what are the features of your game, what do they look like, and how are you going to be able to do them in game? What controls, keys, or skills are you going to need to be able to do it? Lastly, the next section is called conventions. Now this is where we've looked at a range of games it's time to start identifying similarities. This section should include a list of conventions you've found out and examples of how you might use them. For instance, most games have menus. This includes a start menu. Most start menus have three main buttons: play or start game, options to change the volume or other gameplay effects, and exit to exit out of the game back to the desktop. My game would include a menu with at least the play and exit buttons on its home screen. Most games use conventional controls, such as WASD or the arrow keys to walk, E or the left mouse button to interact with things. I will make sure to use these so my player doesn't need to learn new complex controls to actually play my game. The proposal box looks quite a bit smaller in comparison to what we've done so far, but it's effectively the combination of the first parts into what's going to be our actual outcome. So this first question, what is your solution, is more or less everything. Now that you've looked at what exists, you've asked your stakeholder what it is they want, you have an informed perspective, we can tackle this portion of the document. So, your proposal is best done following this layout. Firstly, give a brief overview of what your game is going to be. Then get into each level individually. Level 1, what is in this level visually? Include some screenshots of our research above. Things like assets, UI, colors, environments, things like that. And then more specifically about the UI. What does the UI look like in this level? What does the user interface look like? And then we can include more specific screenshots about that. Now, we know what it looks like. What functions are going to be in this level? What can you do? And for each new level, only mention the unique functions. I would expect the first one you would mention that you can walk around using the WASD keys. You may want to be able to jump using the spacebar. You might think that your game needs the ability to crouch using the control button. Whatever it may be, what functions are you going to include in this level? Well, you can include how these link to conventional video game conventions. Things like, I'm going to be laying out the UI like this because our first-person shooter generally is laid out like this. Bullets down in the bottom right, health in the bottom left or top left. And finally, how does this level help meet the requirements I've identified for the user requirements or the purpose in general? So once again, for each level, we're going to say what is in this level visually, and then get more in depth about the UI. What functions, and for subsequent levels, unique functions, are in this level. What conventions and requirements does it meet? So if you can repeat that for all levels and menus that you're thinking of, that is how we're going to write the proposal. Now, it's quite important that we lay out this section in a clear, obvious way with clear spacing and indentation, because you will need to send this proposal part to your stakeholder and share it with at least 3 unique pairs within your class or the school. And that's, of course, for the feedback portion you see just below. So, simply copy and paste your stakeholder's response, making sure to include your correspondence, if there's some back and forth, in the stakeholder feedback section. Be very clear that you're asking them for feedback. You want them to identify things that they like the sound of, things that they'd rather see changed. Ask if there are enough levels, if there are not enough levels, if the menu has enough options. It's your job to seek the feedback and put it into here. You're going to need that for a higher grade. The improvements part is definitely the shortest part of this document, but it's probably one of the most important. It really solidifies if your document's going to get achieved or a high level grade. If you're able to identify changes that are needed, either based on peer or feedback from their stakeholder, or if you're able to identify things yourself, looking at other people's work and documents, or just intro reflection about your work, that goes into this improvements bit. All you need to do for this section is write what changes you've identified you should make and why. For example, based on the feedback, I should make the pause menu accessible in every level using the escape button. I should also include an option to mute the background music in the pause menu because ... And then we're on to the final statement. This is where excellence is made. This is where we're laying out the final solution, which is a combination of that original solution in the proposal section and any improvements that you've mentioned just before. It should be laid out in the same format that we discussed earlier, talking about the levels, what they visually look like, their UIs, and their functionality. We will then need to answer the questions below. We will need to explain how our final solution solves the problem that we've identified at the beginning of this document. Is it going to be entertaining for our friends? How do we know that? Is it going to help people learn about science? How do we know that? We will then need to identify how we've considered all the conventions and requirements that have been identified earlier. So I've met the convention of the home menu or the start screen menu by adding this, this, and this to it, and in this order. I've met the requirements of having a easy to navigate control system by using the conventional keys as WASD and spacebar to jump. We'll finally identify the resources and scope. Resources refer to the things we're going to need to complete this project. This is more broad than you may first think, and the first few that we're going to discuss apply to everyone, so make sure to include these, and then any more specific ones that apply to you. A resource I will need for this project is time. This project is due in week 6 or 7 of term 3. That includes the designing of the game and the development of it. I will have in-class time, and that amounts to X number of classes a cycle. And I can dedicate some at-home time to it consistently also, and I can elaborate on that here. Another resource will be the device I have access to. Now that may be a school device or a personal device. This is also going to impact how often I can use it, and how powerful my device is going to impact a few things as well, which I can specify here. The software I'll be using for this game is of course Unity, and I'll be writing those scripts in C#. So those are the very, very obvious ones. And then there's a few more obscure resources that you're going to need. A resource that I have access to is Mr. Spence. He's here to help me one-on-one in class to get assistance. I can also contact him with questions and any issues that I'm having outside of school hours, ideally not when he's getting married. Mr. Spence will be able to answer most of my questions, but there are some other resources that I will use to help me, such as online tutorials, the Unity documentation and YouTube videos. I'll use these to upskill myself when I can to implement some more complex things within my game. Another resource I have is of course my stakeholder. our key resource, as this game is for them, and I need to get their feedback throughout the planning and design stages. Another resource I'm going to use is user testing. As a resource I'll utilize when I'm actually developing the game to have my peers try and break my game and identify bugs I may have overlooked. There are a lot of other resources that exist. See what ones you can find, and we're going to plop them in here. Lastly in this document is the scope. Now, scope refers to the amount of work that you want to complete within the resourced allocated time and budget and everything like that. So this is broken into 3 boxes. What I hope to achieve is, at a minimum, what levels, menus, things like that are you going to have, and what functionality is going to be within them. So what I hope to achieve is, at a minimum, what will my game look like and function like. What I will add, if time permits, is your ideal outcome for this project. If I have enough time, I'd like to make 2 levels that contain these features, ... I'm going to include a start and a pause menu for the game, and a game over screen. I'd like to make custom graphics for the start menu using skills I've obtained in Photopea, and on and on and on. Things that your ideal game will have. That brings us to the last box. What would be cool to add, but is outside the scope of this project? This is where you can run wild with things you'd like to help your stakeholders meet his purpose. It could be custom 3D models or paid assets would be cool to add to this project. You could want to add custom music that's made specifically for this game. You may want voice actors or voice characters or cutscenes within your game. You may even want to make a video advertisement for the game itself to help promote it. All of these things are outside of the scope of what we have outside of the scope of the time we have this year, but would be awesome to have in a final fully fledged game. And once you've done this entire document, that's it, it's finished. You now know what levels you want, what functions and visual aspects we want to add to it. We've talked to the stakeholder and gotten their opinion throughout the journey, and we're now ready to start designing what the game is going to look like, which is the next step. So until then.